Good morning, everyone. Morning. So, some of you might remember this film. There was an amazing scene at the very end of a 1996 film called Marvin's Room. Bessie, who's played by Diane Keating, had been taking care of her ill father, as well as her aunt, for 20 years. Now, Bessie, at this time, gets diagnosed with leukemia. And because of this, she gets visited as a surprise by her estranged sister, whose name was Lee, played by Meryl Streep. And when the two estranged sisters visit each other, Bessie reflects on her own life. And as she reflects, she tells Lee, you know, I've been lucky. I've been lucky to have so much love in my life. And her sister, Lee, nods her head, possibly with a little bit of jealousy, and says, yes, Dad and our aunt loved you very, very much. But Bessie responded to her sister by being a little bit taken aback in that moment. She thought, oh no, you don't understand what I'm trying to say. What I meant to say, what I meant was not that I was so lucky to be so loved, but that I was so lucky to have so much love in my heart to give. So what does it mean to be lucky in love? What does that mean to you? I know that for me, in early childhood, I didn't see myself as being lucky in love. I certainly saw my older sister, you talk about sisters and siblings, as being lucky because she seemed to have the bulk, the 100% of both of my parents' love. So I thought, you know, she's lucky in love. Because I thought about the ways in which my parents seemed to just have a natural affinity for her. And when we see other people out there who seem to be luckier in love than us, we usually, if we want love in our lives, we assess what's going on. Well, if I just say she's born with it, then I'm basically damning myself, right? There's no chance for me. But if maybe I could look at the characteristics that she has and try to adopt some of those. You know, my sister was always known for being so pretty. If I could be prettier, maybe I could have some of that love. And she was always known for being so smart. And so I thought if I worked hard enough in school, even though I always felt like I fell short, if I worked hard enough and studied hard enough, maybe I too could get some of my parents' love, that I could be luckier in love. Oh, my sister was also very obedient, and I struggled with that one, but I tried. And so I thought, okay, if I follow what my parents say more and don't argue with them so much, they will love me more. I thought, I'm going to try to get luckier in love. And then, as a young Vietnamese American growing up in Southern California, looking around and thinking about romantic love, I looked out, I was like, who's lucky in love? And I thought, well, all the blondes out there. It was like the 70s and 80s when Christy Brinkley was like CoverGirl model, right? And so I thought if I could use enough of this Sun-In product, remember that, and bleach my hair, then maybe I could be luckier in love like these blondes that I saw, Southern California especially. Of course, since then, my understanding of what it means to be lucky in love has changed. And it is less like Lee's idea and more like Bessie's idea of love. So today, what I'd like to explore with all of you here is these ideas that, number one, what it really means. Well, number one, there's really no such thing as being lucky in love in the sense that the world normally sees it, like Bessie. Lucky to have love come from outside of you and fill you up, and lucky to have these certain outer traits that make you more lovable. But instead, I want to start with a basic unity premise, which is that love, infinite love, is universally, equally given. That God, that our Creator, that Spirit, which is the source of all of us, isn't like a parent who favors a particular child over another, but rather is an unending and unconditional stream of love. And this Spirit of which we are made is implanted within us as a gift. Thus, today's talk title, the gift of love. So the first idea is that love is universally and equally given. The second idea I'd like to share with all of you is that love is a gift, a spiritual gift that was planted in our own being, integral to who we are. But it's a gift that is actually meant not necessarily just to be received, to feel our belovedness, but it is a gift that was meant to be given. So love is a gift that is meant to be given, to be shared, to be expressed. And then finally, especially in these days when there is so much polarity in the world, I want to talk about the idea that our choice to give this love that is within us is a necessary part of the next stage of our human and of our spiritual evolution. If we are to make it, we must make it together in this world. So first, the idea that love is universal and universally given. I first learned this idea through the spiritual teacher, Marianne Williamson, maybe back in 2005 when I was listening to all of her books on CD as I commuted to work. And I remember when I was first exposed to this idea, I had to actually replay what she said twice because I wasn't so sure about it. But she said, when she was using a romance example, and she said, when someone does something, they don't deprive us of love if they do something that upsets us. People do something, and then we choose to block our own inner flow of love. And at that time, I was still new to these unity principles, and I'm like, no, no, no. Surely, my lack of love in this moment was caused by this individual, right? That was the way I was thinking back then, but it planted the seed of an idea. And as I pondered it, I thought, even today, with the love of my life, my husband, he can do the exact same act. Hug me, for instance. And depending on my own inner state, my receptivity, my willingness, I will, in that moment, feel nothing or feel love. So I realized, okay, the difference wasn't out there. So perhaps the difference is in here. And when I focused on that, I looked back to my family story and how, so our souls all have different life paths, don't they? And it might be that some of our circumstances early on in life might be more conducive to that love overflowing in our hearts. And some of our life circumstances, depending on what our souls have chosen, challenge us to feel that love, right? And so early on, wow, in reaction to outer events and how I personally interpreted it, I built a wall around me. So I decided, okay, love wasn't sort of for me. And then I built up this resentment. And so it didn't really matter. I remember my family members even saying, like, don't you see all this evidence? I couldn't see outer evidence of love, right? Because whatever happened, that thing within me was stopped, plugged up. I had put that there and kept that there. So I thought, I have power over this. So I can actually choose to lift that resentment, to release that grudge, to open myself to the possibility that I might be disappointed. And so when I started to do that, my world started filling up. This emptiness that I felt inside started to fill up with a knowing of this love that is in here. And it's always only in here. Someone else does something, and we decide what it means and whether that is worthy of our love to be felt. And so, if we believe in the unity principle, that there is only one power and one presence active in our lives and in the world, God the good, in all, through all, and over all, necessarily within each and every one of us is this capacity equally for love to be experienced in our lives. We have to first stop repressing it in certain situations. Some of us may have felt very lucky in love in all the traditional ways, but then sometimes that love was pulled out from under us. We might have had very loving parents, what we construed as that, but then our parents passed away and there was a loss. But the remembrance that love is within us allows us to then reopen to this notion that no matter what the outer life circumstances, I respond in as love. So next, that leads me into this idea that love isn't just the essence of what we are, but that because it is, if we don't express it, we fail to thrive. And so there's this idea that when we are implanted with a spiritual gift, this gift is not meant for ourselves alone, but meant to be lived out in the world and in expression. And as I worked my way into a more inside-out understanding of love, and as I've been reflecting on that this week, and because of it being, near the holidays, there are two particular memories that came to heart for me as I reflected on love in my life and how the expression or the gift of love has enriched or fed me. I remember two things. Looking back on past Christmas times. You know, it strikes me that I didn't remember as my fondest memory of Christmas the Christmases where I got like the biggest presents from people, right? Instead, there was one particular Christmas memory that I recalled this week that filled my heart. And it was just a simple, seemingly little thing. But those of you who know me well know that I do not cook. I barely bake because, well, the former sugar addict kind of tried to learn. But back when I was at Unity and Marin in California, I had this impulse because I loved the board of trustees at my church. I just loved every one of them. And I thought, I'm going to bake them chocolate chip cookies. And so I got out a recipe and figured I'm going to have to follow this, you know, really in a detailed way. But the thing about it was, the whole time I did it, number one, they weren't expecting it. I did it because I really felt like I want to do something loving and unexpected and kind for them. And so I paid attention. It wasn't just that I was doing this new thing, so I had to really focus on the details. But I thought, I'm going to do every moment of this in love. And so everything from mixing the batter to taking little pieces of the dough, the ones that I didn't snack on myself, and putting them on the sheet. To me, each one, I would think about each of the members of the board, and I would send them love and well-being. I would send them kindness. I would think thoughts about what I was grateful for each one of them. And this is how I baked the cookies. And when I finished, I believe these were the best cookies I had sampled ever. But really, in the end, I remember feeling almost high, you know, like this feeling of elation because I had loved. I realized that when I act in ways that are nourishing to others, that come from a place where, you know, this feeding other people has this nurturing quality to it and devotedness in it, that something in me gets so awakened and enlivened. Like I had more energy and more joy simply from the act of service. They had not even eaten them. They had not yet expressed any appreciation for them, but it was in the act itself. Remembering this, it struck me how I can continue to do that all the time. But there's another memory that really touched me. I think I've shared before that we grew up in not a very wealthy household. We fled here from Vietnam, and we came here with our grandparents. So I slept in the same bedroom with my grandmother up through like age 9, I believe. And so at one point when it was just like 4 of us in the bedroom and my grandmother was in the other bed, I had a lot of insomnia. Well, actually, maybe it was through age like 10, because I had a lot of insomnia through about age 10. And my grandmother suffered from arthritis. And I remember I would toss and turn and try to fall asleep. We'd have to go to bed at 10, but it would be like midnight. I'd be tossing and turning and kind of checking over to see if my grandmother was awake or not, because I didn't want to bother her if she wasn't. But if she was awake, I might, you know, say something. And I could hear rustling, and at one point, I mean, this is often the case, I would turn to her and say, "Grandma, you know, are you awake? Do you need me to massage your legs?" And she would be like, "Yeah." And so I'd get out the Bengay, and I'd go over to her bed, and she's like 4'10", so she makes me look like an Amazon, you know, like she's this little woman, and I'd go over, and I would just tenderly massage her knees and her legs. And then not long after that, I would calm down. I would get sleepy, and I'd crawl back into my bed, and I'd fall asleep, like really easily. And when I think about that experience, Back then I thought, oh, I'm a good kid doing this thing for my grandma, you know. But when I look back, I realize that probably the act of devotion, the act of gentle nurturing toward her, the act of love is what calmed me. Because I believe that when we express love, we start to heal more, right? There's something in us that thrives when we're able to give the gift of our loving nature toward others. And so I share both of these stories as personal stories for a reason. I don't believe that you could look outside yourself at other people and say, that act of service that can look generous to us from the outside and call it an act of love. Because I think only we in our own hearts know what's an act of love. How many of us have done great acts of service out of guilt or, sort of bitterness or feeling like we should? To me, while that might have positive effects in the world, what I'm talking about is an invitation to be aware, either to add acts of devotion that really come from our heart, acts that are done in love, or to revisit what we're already engaged in on a day-to-day basis, whether I'm home early and I'm cooking dinner for my husband or vice versa. Am I doing that in this spirit of love that fills me from the inside out and flows outward as a gift to the world? I think that when I don't do this, I start to feel empty inside. Like if life just becomes a series of tasks, especially over the holidays, there's an emptiness that comes forth from within us. We do the things we think we should do, but we have stopped doing them in love. 1 Timothy chapter 4 says, neglect not the gift that is in thee, the gift of love that is in all of us equally, if God is truly love. And so, for my final point today, I want to bring us to our current times. In our modern day, again, we don't need to be reminded, I suppose, there seems to be an extraordinary amount of polarity, differences in the world. And there is a French philosopher, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who planted seeds of an awareness around the idea that perhaps separateness is not something bad, but that it's part of our evolutionary process. What I mean is this: if God is oneness, one, and doesn't have anything it's experiencing, in order to experience life, that infinite oneness must have the illusion of separation, right? And so it's like this idea that God involves itself in humankind in the process of involution, becoming rock, consciousness slowing down, becoming rock, becoming tadpole, becoming ape, becoming humankind. But in that process of this infinite spirit, like slowing down and solidifying, there's this rock and that rock and the separateness of each thing, and each thing has its identity that's distinct. And right now, we live in a time when this distinctness and this separateness and what seems like differences that will never be reconciled, it feels so great. But what if there's always this curve that's happening? And even as God's forgetfulness, as Spirit's forgetfulness results in material life as we know it, us joined together in waking up to our true nature, our nature as love, is the beginning of rising up again. But yet, we have the beauty of differentiated life, as we say here in unity, the embracing of differences. So we don't stop at the idea, your views are different from mine. We lean into that idea. We bring love into that idea. These outer differences are nothing compared to that one universal gift, the essence, that is what we all are. So if in the midst of our outer differences, we can tap into that love such that there is a tipping point created simply by the unity movement, where if each of us were willing to not look at being lucky in love as a matter of what love the world gives me, but what love I can express out from my heart to share with a world that really needs it, that perhaps we can take that next step in our spiritual and collective evolution. I was thinking that as we gather around the Christmas tree this Christmas, I'm going to get to go home and see my family after Christmas Eve here. But I had this vision, this image of us all gathered around a Christmas tree. Not just my family, not just Unity Church, but the world. And then I saw that there were no wrapped presents outside this tree. There was, none of the typical pretty bowed presents. And then I looked around and I thought, where it? What if all of us, the people gathered round the tree, are like the unwrapped presents? And that opening, unwrapping that gift is essentially each of us individually, not, nudging the other person to do it, but each of us individually going in and unwrapping the closed, wrapped up heart that is within us. So our work around the Christmas tree, if we collectively gather and unwrap love by opening our closed hearts, that we could begin to evolve into the next stage of our evolution that to me requires that we do this together. The same philosopher, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, suggests that love is a sacred reserve of energy that is like the blood of spiritual evolution. Have we lost hope that it is possible? Or is there a chance that we have just enough hope that each one of us might do the inner work that fills our own souls, as well as helps to serve the world? The gift of an open heart. I'll close our time together by sharing a quotation that's also in your bulletin, the beautiful words of L.R. Nost. Do not be dismayed by the brokenness of the world. All things break, and all things can be mended. Not with time, they say, but with intention. So go. Love intentionally, extravagantly, and unconditionally. The broken world waits in darkness for the light that is you. And so we close this time, and I invite you to prepare now for a time of meditation.